And then a black Gemara, we're up to Samachei with Aleph, we're in the middle of Machlek between Rab and Rabbi Yochanan when we're saying that you have to draw a lottery for another pair because one of them died in the first one, either the Chatas or the Azazel. The question is, okay, so the second pair, the one that has to be replaced, obviously replaces the first one. Which one will become the second one? For example, the Chatas is the one that died, and now you have Azazel, have one surviving animal from the first pair, which is an Azazel, and then you have the second pair, which is now suitable by Azazel. Which is the one that you will use? And because Rab says the mitzvah is the first one, like Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yochanan says no, the second one. Says the Gemara. We're asking a number of questions, and we said our Mishnah seems to agree with Rab, and the Brai says like Rabbi Yochanan, and in fact Rab learns in our Mishnah the argument of Chachamim of Rabbi Yochanan is whether Balei Chayim nitchin or not. According to Rab, Balei Chayim does never get pushed away completely. It goes right back. It bounces back. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, even a living animal, not only a dead animal, but even a living animal gets pushed away. And once the first group is rejected, everything has to come from the second group. And that's the machlekes of Yehuda and Chacham. Now the Gemara continues on top of the page. Tonight we learn our Mishnah about 6 lines from the top. We'll continue to ask questions. This question will be on Rab. Tonight we learned in our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, Tammuz. The Chachamim say that the animal we're not going to use, which according to the Chachamim is the second from the second lot. What do you do with it? You let it wander about until it gets contract to mummy, you sell it. And Rabbi Yehuda says it should die. So right now the Gemara thinks what Rabbi Yehuda is saying is that animal that you say that should graze, I say should be put to death because Chatfas Hatzibur gets put to death. That means the second pair, it goes to graze. And the problem is going to be as follows. What's the problem going to be? The second group is the one that you'll be making the Azazel, and the first group is the one that's going to be wandering about. So the Chachamim, therefore, Rabbi Yochanan are both saying the same thing, that the first group, the surviving animal, is the one that we have a problem with. According to Rabbanan, you let it wander about. Comes Rabbi Yehuda says, no, let it die. In other words, you close the door with a pen and let it stop. Rabbi Yehuda Yamus. And where's the kapara? The sheni shibizuk sheni. Both the Chacham and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda agree that the kapara is the second of the new group. Fine. The problem is Rab. Rab learned that according to the Chachamim, the Tanakama, it's the surviving animal does not get rejected. That's the one that bounced back. That's the one you'll be using. So which means that which is the one that's going to be wandering about? The second group. Now, if it's a second group you're going to be wandering about, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda holds definitely the second group is one that you're going to be using. But you're telling me Rabbi Yehuda says you have to let it die. So then, which one is he going to be using with a second animal? Rav, who says that's the second animal in the second group that goes wandering about, and Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't want you to wander once it dies. Rabbi Yehuda Yamus, Rabbi Yehuda. So which animal are you going to use? The first one is rejected, the second one you're saying put to death. So which animal are you going to use for whatever it is? Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? You think Rabbi Yehuda is talking about the very same animal? He's saying that animal that we're not going to use. By you, it's the second group, and by me, it's the first group. That animal we're not going to use. You think we just let it wander about. I think you should put it to death. But we're not talking about the same animal. We're talking about different groups. But the same animal that's not going to be that we say we're not going to be used. It's the question is, what are you going to do with it? Me savre Rabbi Yehuda Hasheni should Sheni Koi, Rabbi Yehuda Hashem should Nishi Koi. The second, so therefore no problem. The Ika and others actually ask this question from here. Rabbi Yehuda says, I have two arguments here. One argument is you say that a tzibur, that this karma chatlav, you let it wander about. Let's say it's a chatlav that's left over. You say let it wander about, graze, and then we'll sell it when it has a mum. But I say that it should be killed. A chatlav shemeis ba'aleh, or a chatlav shemeis chatlav, you let it, what do you call it? You let it die. So that's one argument. Whether you say by a tzibur, chatzah tzibur ein a mason, never gets put to death, you let it wander about, or you say chatzah mason. That's argument one. Then what's the va'oid? The va'oid is he says that if either animal dies, the other one is been pushed away, rejected. In other words, the chacham hold that it does not get rejected. It means a chacham hold like Rab holds like a chamim, that the surviving animal does not get rejected. You can use it, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. Both of them, if Nishtapach Adama, you kill the Thomas Mishaleach. If Mishaleach died, Yishpach Dama, because they get rejected and that's it, finished. So the problem is, according to Rabbi Yochanan holds that the Rabbanan agree that the first animal gets rejected. If you're using the second pair. Who's Rabbi Yehuda arguing with? What's the says like this? Rabbi Yehuda said, Nishpech Hadam from the first group. If the blood spilled out, that means that it's useless now the chatas because you have to shut another one. Is Yom Mishtalech. That's it. The Mishtalech also dies. No, but it's rejected. You kill it. It dies. You close the door, let it, and you make sure it dies. Meis HaMishtalech. If the Mishtalech it dies, Yishavech Adam. You cannot continue using the chatas. You spill the blood, reject the whole thing. You're starting again. So basically, Rab, I understand Rab. That's it. Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham are arguing whether the concept of a Baal Chaim gets rejected. Reisha, so Rabbi Yehuda is arguing two arguments. First of all, you say Bechat Tzibur, you let it wander about. I say let it die. The Sefer pligi in the second one, they argue about Baal Chaim, whether a Baal Chaim, a living animal, gets rejected. Rabbi Yochanan holds that everyone agrees that a living animal gets rejected, and therefore, which animal you're going to use both animals on the second pair? What's Rabbi Yehuda arguing? Kasha, it's a problem. What I don't understand is Gemara here, and I'm looking for some great. I learned yesterday that the Mishnah supports Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, I know, but I follow the Brisa. So what's we're asking the question from the Mishnah? We already said that the Mishnah is not Rabbi Yochanan. Clear. Anyway, further Gemara, what was the next thing you said? If let's say you shechted the karmachatas, and then you had the blood ready to do your sprinkling, and then the blood spilled out. So you have to start the lottery all over again. Don't rely on the surviving member. You almost kill the Zazel and you start all over again. Says the Gemara. And then he said all the way around as well. If the Zazel dies, you have to then pour out the blood and start all over again. The Gemara, if the blood spilled out. I understand. If the blood spilled out and the Mishtaleh, the Zazel should be killed as well. Why? The akati lois avid mitzvah. You haven't yet done the mitzvah. It says you haven't yet done the mitzvah splitting the blood, and we learned before the word chukah. Everyone agrees that all the avodas prim, all the avodas that go inside the way the big day lovon is ma'akid. Okay, the blood spilled out. You didn't do your avodah prim of the seir l'shem, and therefore you have to do it again. I understand. Okay, and once you do it again, you have to do new gadol. I understand this whole union. If the Azazel died, what's the avodas prim of Azazel? Only one avodah prim that's ma'akiv. That is the goy. The vidui is not ma'akiv. Throwing off the cliff is definitely not ma'akiv because we said before, Ishiti, even Ishol can do that. Only the thing that's ma'akiv in your kippur chukah is big day lovin. The question is only avodah prim or even avodah chutz of big day lovin. But so the only avodah big day lovin is the hagrola. So the hagrola is ma'akiv, but you did that already. The rest is only the mitzvah. Having saying VG and throwing it off the cliff. So why, if this animal died, you reject the karmachatza? What are you doing wrong there? What's wrong? Why mark it? Nothing to be marked there. We have a special pasuk. It says in pasuk that goat which is going to Azazel is Yoma Chai Lifnei Hashem. It should stand alive for Hashem. Lichapei. So Gedash al Chapa means after the other kapara, after the kapara of the other animal, so it has to be alive. Ad Masa Yizokal is high. Till when does that have to be alive? Ad Shas, until you finish sprinkling the blood of the chatas. And if you didn't, then the whole thing is no good. It's ma'akiv, and that's why to start again. Now the Gemara starts in the Sugya. We learned over there, and we already had this shkolim. What happens at Bnei Yair, the people in the city, shesholchu eshiklei, and remember when they set aside the kohanim, set aside the shkolim at the beginning of the year, they had in mind al hagovui, on all those that are, on the way coming in. No, we want every member of Klal Yisrael to be involved. So the people who are latecomers are also included because they have in mind al hagovui and also al ha'avad. If money was on the way and got lost, weird, it was a responsibility of the Hegdish. When is that? So from house we learned over there, Bnei Yair, the members of the city, Shesholchu Eshiklein, they sent their shkolim over with a Shemechinam. A Shemechinam is only chayiv on negligence, but he's potted if it was stolen or lost. And what happened was it was either stolen or lost, which they are exempt from, the shliach. So the question is as follows: do they have to send again? Or do they have to send again? So the question is as follows: Im nitzma truma. Let's say if the 3 boxes were already set aside, already filled up with coins, and they already said, we are taking, care of Klal Yisrael, so that means they already took over the money wherever the money is. So the money got lost or stolen, it was in Hegdish possession already. So therefore, they have to.
Boxes are now full.
They were tidy with raising 3 boxes.
Even
though we learned of
they
this
went through the prices, box 1, box 2, box 3,
Yeah,
they all used that up.
Then you use it up. They
No,
said it. They take out the lishka and they say that this is box number 1. Remember?
Okay.
And they did that. We learned in the Mishnah Shkolm that there was different periods of the year when they did that. But either this, even it either this happened after that period, those 3 periods, or maybe not every time they follow those 3 periods.
Which box is going to be which.
Olive base, give them a
That's all.
That's what we did. So now this shliach has to swear that it was stolen, right? The shliach has to swear. And all that kind of stuff. So who's he swearing to? Who are the bailim? The bailim is hegdish. Says the Gemara. So even the truma is not burning against body. The shliach has to swear to the gaboy. Well, let's say it happened before they finished. Yeah. So then hegdish yet didn't take it over yet completely. So then the loss was to the people in the city because they might have to replace it. So then the shliach has to swear to the people in the city. There's boy in the bnei they have to send others to play because they haven't yet given to the base of English. Now, what happened at Nimtzu? It was lost, but then they found it. So now they have a second lot of Machs Shekel. Similar, but see what's coming here is when the case was stolen, the Ganavim confessed. When they found out it was stolen, they decided to give it back. So what happens now? So now they have 2 sets of Machs Shekel for this year for Tavshin Pei Aleph. Elu the Elu Shkolim Heim. They both say shkolim. They both have to be donated to the base of English, and you cannot say I'll be getting to my cheshbon for next year. It doesn't work. You can't go from one year to the next. And he disagrees. He says, yeah, they have now they have a credit, so I have a voucher, and they gave them master shekel for next year.
What will be the same if it's back at the Bailim, not in Hagdish.
It is. Everyone agrees with Bailim. The question is, can Bailim say, well, we gave 2 master shekels this year? What do we do? Abida says you can use it as a credit for next year.
The one that says no,
because we'll see in a second. But the reason why not, because we learned out before that you have to have each year has to be separate. What's a sweater of Yehuda? Why could you use it for next year? Look, Rabbi, my time at Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's sweater? My Rabbi, to sweater of Yehuda would hold. He holds that the chayvus of this year can be discharged next year. We'll discuss right now. So the Gemara is that really so? Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can go 1 year to the next year. Let me ask you a question from our Gemara here. I said, by ask a question. The par, which is a private thing, and the goat of Yom Kippur, which is a public thing. They got lost. The so they had to replace them. Likewise, the goat of Avodah Zarah with the entire community sin of Avodah Zarah. And Bezdin told them that it's all right. They have to bring a par for an oila and a seir for a chatas. Sha'avdu, they lost it. And they replaced it with others. Kulan yamusu. And then what happened was they recovered them. You found the original ones. What do you do? He says, you whatever you did, and the other one they get put to death because you do not carry. You do not say, "I'll use it next Yom Kippur." You don't say use it next Yom Kippur. So Yehuda holds you don't carry over credit for next year, and that's the question is going to be. What do you tell Machzor Shekel that if you found it recovered, you can use it for next year's cheshbon? How can the par v'soy Yom Kippur can't use it for next year's cheshbon? It's interesting. An age limitation.
They say the expression they use here is this year's chayiv you can pay off next year.
That's right.
But yet the case we're dealing with is
the par of this
where
year.
we're trying to pay off next year's chayiv with this year's.
No, the other way around.
But they said
Machzor exactly. So they're paying off the chayiv of next year with this year's money. The same thing with par v'soy. But that's what he means. Yeah.
There's a very big difference.
But that's what he means.
There's a chayiv that's existent chayiv, and I'm trying to pay off last year's chayiv.
This is not. It's not a rule. He said Rabbi is explaining this particular din. So the wording has to fit into the story. So, I mean, the story is.
But it seems to be reversed. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. The chayiv for next year's money doesn't exist yet. I'm trying to pay off a non-existent debt.
But you know it's it's all Mechusas Mach.
The last year's chayiv exists. I'm just late with payment.
You paid if you have an extra payment for last year. Or this year's chayiv. So now the Gemara wants to compare. One wants to compare karbonis. What the Gemara is trying to do is compare karbonis to maximum shekel. We're going to try to make a difference. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon say yiru achi yistaibu. They say by the part of the sea, let it wander about. Be mochel, you sell them. Be yiplu the main and gava. She'ain chatat tzibah meis. They say that chatat tzibah, but both agree you cannot use for next year. Our problem is not Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Our problem is Rabbi Yehuda. You just said that the maximum shekel can be used for next year. Why can't you use it for next year? On Malay, he says to him, Carbonat Tzibak, I'm asking from Seir. Well, the Seir is from Carbonat Tzibak. Shiny Carbonat Tzibak is very different. What do we know about Carbonat Tzibak? Can have Tobi Rabbeisha. I'm not talking about Rabbeisha. I'm a crow. It says in Pasuk, Zois, Oilas, Chodesh, the Chotshoi, the Chotshashana. We learn from there, Omra Toide, Chadesh. The Torah clearly into this pasuk that next year has to be from next year's money, and therefore you cannot use last year's carbon that you set aside, you lost, and you found to pay off next year's chayv. A special pasuk, but this is karbonas tzibur. And remember, this is important because there's two karbonas we're talking about here on Yom Kippur: the par and the soya. The soya is a carbon tzibur, but remember the par is on its own money. Yeah, it brings his own carbon. So how can, what's wrong with that? Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you say that it's limited to things that are limited by time, like a Rosh Chodesh carbon or a Yom Tov carbon and so on? But let's say Ketzam is Bayach. Why can't you say Ketzam?
We live for everything. You're saying that it comes, there's a time that Chadesh, you have to renew. It comes a time to renew everything. So the money, remember the leftover money we learned last time goes to the maintenance of the walls around the shrine and all that.
What you're saying, even though you're dealing with a carbon, a specific carbon that's limited in time because it's got to be on Rosh Chodesh, but this one's got to be on Yom Tov. You're saying this includes the carbonis for the
everything.
Year, not
right.
Parts of the year.
So Chodesh Yitash Chadesh, and which Chodesh? Chodesh Zelachem, which is this. That's what we learn. Says the Gemara, okay, you tell me that a carbon tzibur is different. It has to be from the new stuff, not from my private money. So there's a question. That will be a good answer for Seir. That'll be a good answer for the goat. But Parma Yiklamember. It's Aaron Kohen's own private bull. Yeah. Says the Gemara, for the Seir comes from the Lishcha. Says the Gemara, Gzeida, we are worried, Par Otter Seir. If we're going to allow the park to use last year's money or the animal that you lost that you found, people think you can do the same with the goat. It's sometimes interesting when do we say Kohanim Zizne, they know what they're doing, and when do we say that we have to make Zayda because they don't know what they're doing? Because who handles all this? The Kohanim.
I asked that question once about something, and the guy answered and says there was Zizim doesn't even know coming to Chacham.
Okay. We did have in the Gemara in the end of different levels of Xeris. Tough Xeris we decided to leave in the base of Midrash, small Xeris now. I guess there might be a tough Xeris. I don't know. Xeris part of the Xeris. If the Sachak of the holding is Xeris, why would Rabbi Yehuda insist that the animal should be put to death? If the only reason why we're putting the part that we're saying we don't want you to use a part is because if we're going to use a part, they're going to use a seir, so it's like Zayda. Okay, so you won't use it. So tell let the animal wander about, get a moon, sell it, use the money for something better. Why put it to death? Now, obviously, as the Shagadai says, each one of the next few answers, each including this one here, they thought that this is a big enough Zayda to force us to kill the animal. Shouldn't be there anymore. Then he continues, okay. But Nachmet. This whole thing of Tobi Rabbi says that that you use new money is only a mitzvah. It's not ma'akif. Let me know mishmul. Kapana tzibra boim bechanis and mitzvah lebna chadash. So mitzvah to bring new money. Oh, but behaving a yashan yatsa. You're lacking the mitzvah. You didn't do the right thing. So the so Nachman, I put it to death. This is in this case like for two things. This is like a b'diavad. Maybe in this case they should, under the circumstances we should allow you to use here because it's a b'diavad. You didn't do the chatchila. It just happened this way because of this situation. And definitely the party you shouldn't have to put it death. Hello, what Abdei says. The problem is that the seir comes from a goydel, but you have to make a new goydel every year. How can you use the seir next year? And you can't have the same goydel we already before already. You can only do it once. Yamad once, not twice. So you can only have the seir once. So next year you can't use the seir again. That's the same question. What about the park? So the Gemara have a nice and nago. First of all, why don't you make a girdle again? So the Gemara doesn't bring what we learned before that an animal can only be done once. Maybe because it's a new year, another Yom Kippur. Maybe it's not an issue anymore. Maybe people will think that you can make a girdle, but they'll think that last year's girdle is what's working on this one here. They won't know that you made a new girdle right now. Nobody's privy to it.
It's going to be a public We saw this like this.
We recognized animals.
We saw this so we wanted like this in the front. But you guys can say
A couple of will see that there's I don't know. Make a mistake in halacha. So in my hot tennis, it makes sense by a say, okay, I understand why by a say you say you shouldn't. We don't want you to use it because people will think it's from last year's grade. It's Zeta, but par ma'ikol. What about a par? You say the par to seir. I hear it even schwach. You think it's a gzeda to gzeda. The whole seir itself is only a gzeda. People think it's last year's girdle using that this is girdle, and because of that, we're going to also the par we're going to get rid of because people will think it's a seir, and we're going to kill it according to Peter. Very much gzeda you have musu. Now, how this is stronger than the previous answer in Gemara, I don't know, but it's like gzeda, and so what's the problem here? They wanted to say from the teacher Abaye, they were discussing this thing. And you know what, Zeta? We're worried. We're worried that what happens if the kohen, the way Rashi learns is ha kohen is the kohen god. Taisa says any kohen died because every kohen is part of the animal. And the other Meforshim after Taisa, if every kohen died, and even Azazel as well, maybe any yid will die. If a yid dies, it's an yid die all the time, and every yid is a chelik in the animal. Or for some reason or other, the yid's chelik in the animal is not so important, critical. Versus the kohen, every kohen there is a chelik, and any kohen dies, it's a chata shemesh ba'aleh. But Rashi says ha kohen, which means the kohen god, only the kohen god, warrior will die. Zeta, the reason why we don't want to leave it for next year is what happens to the kohen god who dies, and therefore. The problem with Rashi is, if the kohen all dies, you won't use it. What's chash exactly? And that's why Taisa learns. We're talking about a kohen might die. You're not aware of in the wider community. You're not aware of every single kohen that you're including, and maybe somebody died. But the way Rashi learns, so each one has a shverikite. Maybe the kohen will die. So this explains the par. This explains the par that one because it belongs to Aaron Kohen, so therefore the Kohen Gadol passes away, you can't use it anymore. So therefore we're going to. Obviously, what about the goat? What about the case of the goat? It's a tzibur, and then tzibur mesa. What's the problem there? What are you going to say? Why Taka can't use the for next year? And we're not happy with the reason before either. They're all schwache reasons. Remember, the first one's only a mitzvah. You have to use the new money, or the whole thing of a seir by a goydel kaveh. People are making mistakes. It's all schwache meises. And therefore we can't accept should be put together. It's what it says. The goat is now paket. The goat we are not allowing you next year because of the problem of the par, and might be a chat to shemeish about that. But you want from Gzeda and Musa, same problem. For Gzeda, we're going to kill the animal according to Buddha. Hello, I'll tell you what we're worried about. Gzeda, we are worried from chatos she'avra shnasa. What about if a chat? Remember, all kabbanas, if any korban chatas has to be up to a year old and no more than a year old. So, what happens if this chatas might be over a year old? And that's a problem. Let's say it was 3 weeks old when you brought it to Dashin Kippur. If we allow him to hold it over to next year, the chatas is going to be over a year old, and that's no good. So therefore, to avoid that, so you might understand. Gzeida, it's a gzeida. If it's tak over a year old, you're not using matayda. In fact, it's more than since Yom Kippur is a year. It's already a year. Forget about any pull them in gzeida. Now that you raise an interesting thing here that you cannot have a chatas that's more than a year old, then how can you even think of using this year's seir for next year? It's obvious nothing. There's a Gemara holy cash. That's not a problem. Why? Because how do you measure a year? Because the Rebbe holds that a year goes the solar year. A lunar year is for other things and everything else, but this is a solar year. If you listen by his but would give you a year to get your house back, it's 365 days. And this is 355 days. Shana is 354 days. So what happens if you brought it was 8 days old, you brought the last year, Yom Kippur was 8 days old, and then I lost it, I found it. So therefore, when it's 8 days old, it comes to, you go next year, it'll be 8 days, 355, so 363. 363. Doesn't matter. We're doing the solar year. It's irrelevant. Rashi says that it's 364 days. Hard to understand Rashi, unless we're saying that that a year means not including the day. A year means less than a year, according to Rashi, maybe. It has to be less than a year. And Miyem Hashmini V'Holo, so it could definitely be 8 days. The problem also is, remember, we learned that not only you cannot check it for 8 days old, also you have to set it aside. You have to do the whole Hagdosh and everything else. So maybe really it was a 9-day-old, if you work it up, it was a 9-day-old carbon. And then you work the other way, it comes out to 354 days. Because 354 days is a Shnas Chama, and that's 11 days apart.
No, it's 54.
So then, but if you have to wait another day, so they couldn't do it till 355 or whatever it has to be there, and then you will have that 354 will come out exactly 8 days. If you hold that you have to be makish it only when it's 8 days old. Anyway, you try to work out the cheshbon of Rashi. The time we learn shana t'mima moina shalosh maybe 5 days according to the solar calendar. We're talking here about shana t'mima about bay, but the chayma. And even though it said the word t'mima there, so therefore cause the Rebbe to learn it means a solar year, but we learn from there other thing also is 365 days. They say year is a solar year, but the im this abla meichet. But if it's an ibiyah, they get an extra month. And so maybe one could have answered it goes even in a year with a ibiyah. So it's not a problem of having a bench. Say if you follow the what do you call the lunar calendar, and there's an ibiyah, so it's possible to go from Yom Kippur to the next year. Actually, doesn't make sense. Only good, right? Sorry.
On the calendar, in which case
that's what the Chachamim say. Chachamim say lunar. That makes it too many. Yom Kippur is always the same. According to Chachamim, it's a lunar calendar. According to Chachamim, it's impossible ever to have the chatas from 1 year to the next year because it'll be more than a year. Doesn't matter if it's EB or not EB, it'll be more than a year. Yeah, 12 of the month, or no, even if it's 13 of the month, but it's a year. It's coming to the same day of the calendar. It doesn't matter how many months were in between. It'll be more than a year. But according to Rebbe, you hold that it goes according to the solar calendar. It'll be it goes by the number of days. So in a year, but it's not a leap year, it will be less than a year old. Still, when you keep the next year, it's still less than a year old. Both can be in the same year. Talking about a hot time to say, okay, you answer by saying, "Pi migel my par can be up to 3 years old." What do you say then? You say the par to say we're worried about the par because of the seed. Talking about Gzeda, because of Gzeda Yamus. Again, Gzeda, you're going to kill the animal. Number one. Chatas sha'avra shnasa l'riyazla l'chayda chatas. If a chatas is over his age, nobody says you put it there. It's not like a chatas shemesa ba'aleh that the owner died, or a chatas that the bailim were raising this chatas because you found it and you brought another one instead. This is just old age, and old age you don't kill. The amarish lakish chatas over shnasa renois kilui amed basic quadrat. If it's standing in a basic quadrat, that's an expression. In other words, a claim cannot get to it. That's all. You cannot use it. But it's not from the 5 chatois that the halach machine is that you put to death. So why would I do to say?
I thought it meant it's as good as dead.
No, it means interesting. It's an expression, interesting analogy, saying that just like the animal standing in basic quarters, nothing wrong with the animal. Animal will come tummy. The animal could be brought in his back, but the koyin can't get to it. Same thing with this animal over a year old. It's a road to the mizbeach.
It's a year too.
I thought the animal was dead.
Elam, what I says, Robert, you know what the problem is? You worry about having the sheep hanging around for the whole year. You'll stumble. What kind of stumbling? Now, first we learned, ain't magdish that today. There's no base in English. You're not allowed to donate anything to the Bedek Habayis because it's holy, and you can't donate it anywhere. You might end up using it for yourself, which is an available. The aim marichin, nor can you do erchin because the money is holy and we're going to donate it. The aim machrimin, nor do you chedim. There's a chedim that goes to the Bedek Habayis. There's a chedim that goes to the koinim, and there's a machlekes about stam charomin. Rashi holds that this gemara holds a stam charomin. I mean, he didn't specify he's supposed to go to Bedek Habayis, but you can't do anything with it. Kainim, you can give to the kainim, but the Bedek Habayis, you can't, and you're scared that while sitting in your house, you'll use it for your own purpose. What have you to do it? You did one of these things we told not to. Get rid of it straight away. Behemoth, put it to death. Pay this let them all rot. Don't use it. Let them all get ruined. Mice and money, but the metal kalim, which doesn't get ruined over time. Toss it away. The ace of sorry, it's an expression we have it all the time. And you
transport the value of the benefit to the
exactly. But we had a machlekes was Yama Melech or anything. Remember the machlekes the Gemara. The A's says the Gemara, the A's who Iker. What do you mean we say Iker? Use Iker can be castrating or something. What do you mean Iker by the animal? Noyel delis l'fanel, you shut the door, don't feed it, he may samela. Sounds cruel. Takolo the mic. So what exactly are we worried about? So stumble. In what way? Itakol the hakrava, that what? That they're by mistake bring it up as a carbon during the year. Then I feel like, oh, how can you ever let any animal wander about, worry that you might end up taking this? If the animal remains alive and it's wandering about, you might use it for a carbon. So we're not worried about that. Because obviously they were careful that a special place for those let them graze, it wouldn't mix up. The din is you're not allowed to share. You're not do any work with the animal because it's consecrated for next Yom Kippur. Then I feel Kodi is nami an odious. You're not allowed to do any carbon that any animal that belongs to the base of Midrash let it wander about. Kos man that belongs to the base of Midrash, you're not allowed to share it. You're not allowed to with it and so on. So what's a chilik Yom Kippur? This animal, any other animal. All other animals that you're letting wander about, we know that we're waiting for a mum and we are going to sell it. So therefore, the la basa krovinu, they're not going to be. There's not enough shash that you're going to bring it up because everyone knows that these animals are not going to be used. Like taribuhu. So therefore, you don't care what happens to the animal, you let it wander about. You wanted to get it. But the basa krovi, this animal you're preserving, not a shy, you're preserving for next Yom Kippur. For Tori, what we're saying there's a takala. We're in the case of the part. You're preserving the next Yom Kippur, so you want it to be brought up as a carbon. You're going to be careful with it. Toriba, and therefore you might, because you're preoccupied and you say we're a carbon, you might not be using it for a carbon the wrong one. So in fact, this whole concept of whether we are worried about the color or not, in this case, the machlekes tonight. One place we learn pesach like carbonation. Let's say you lost your carbon pesach, you brought another one. Now you still have your original carbon pesach. You can sell it to somebody who needs a pesach. Don't let it hang around. Give it away. Somebody said, we don't want you to hang around because you might have it the color. B'sheni, and let's say you brought a b'sheni, and then you could have lishana haba. And then, so this day holds, and if you didn't use it, let's say you set it out for the same thing happened to Shani, and now the next Pesach is 11 months away, this kind of holds. So hold it up for 11 months. Hold it over. Or but Tanya I don't want you to hold it over. Get rid of it. What's the machlekes? My lab is a color plea. They're arguing whether we will allow you to have this animal roaming your house for 11 months. Will you end up using it for something else? So I think, no. Lloyd, no. Maybe no, but there's no knife. Maybe nobody worry about the color. The problem is age. Current Pesach also has to be a year old or less. And the machlek is that can you use this year Pesach for next year Pesach? According to the Rebbe that says it's a 365 day year, you can use it next Pesach. It still won't be over a year old. Going to the Chamin, you want to lit a candle, it'll be more than a year old. You can't. And it has to be a year and 8 days old. The like kasha, Rebbe Rabbanan. Says we learned the same thing is you set aside money for your carbon pesach. You got lost, you got recovered. Same machlek is now. What's the problem with money over there? There's no age problem. So what's the issue there? And Lashmama the Kobli Yishmama that I argue about the colors that I agree with. Okay, good stuff. I think tomorrow maybe it's